but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
People like Narrowcast Media Group have enabled us to really get exposed to so many people globally.
Neil and Catherine and all of your associates, we simply couldn't have done it without you.
Karen and Neil Stewart and their team are professional conference organisers for their exceptional efforts to have made this such a successful event. So I'd like to give them a warm round of applause. And if your organisations are ever organising an event, we highly recommend them.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
Nothing, I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate
the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
That it's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box set's curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
nothing, I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
That it's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
nothing, I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
That it's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is...
What's something I don't know.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
That it's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
And welcome everyone to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue MacDonald. I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals. And it's my pleasure to be chairing the session this evening. And I'm welcoming Geraldine Lucas and Jackie Williams. So where are they? There they are. And
good evening, everyone. Lovely to be here.
Hi, Geraldine. Hi, Jackie. Lovely that you've been able to make it. Like we always do with our guests, we always ask them to share a moment of the week with us. And we'll start with Jackie, if we might. Jackie, your moment of the week.
Well, Sue, this is really big news. My new grandson, who I visited the other day, at last opened his eyes to look at me direct.
Oh.
So he's now, how old is he now? He's 12 days old now.
Oh, gosh. Oh, how precious.
And we met him at 4 or 5 days because there is a new, very positive thing, I think, Sue, that parents are now going into a bubble for the first few days just to be with themselves and maybe their other children. Possibly a little quick visit from grandparents, but nobody else. And actually, I thought that is a really marvellous return to that nurturing of that family unit.
Now, how does that work, getting a bubble? That sounds really good. It's like telling mum to stay in a dressing gown for a few days so that people don't expect her to be a hostess.
Yeah.
Did that come from you, Jackie?
No,
it's come from the midwife.
No, it's come from, I think, social media and any networks that parents are on. But I think it's one of the better returns to this nurturing of a mum and a newborn, which we sort of automatically did, but maybe didn't do it in the best way, keeping them in hospital, keeping them so maybe we won't be seeing newborn babies in supermarkets and mums going out maybe quite as early as they did, but having time,
catching up with themselves. Oh, that's lovely.
Well,
then that's a first positive thing I've heard for days on social media. That's fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jackie. Now, Geraldine, you're in competition now for this.
Good evening, everybody. I think for me, it's we've had our February 23 cohort who have reached the end of their training, and it's just it's been really inspirational for me to see them go through that journey, and to see them come to the end of it, because it's extremely hard work, and the dedication of the cohort has been exemplary to see. So
Oh, fabulous. And that's lovely too. It's sort of,
yeah,
that is a lovely progression as a teacher, isn't it? It's lovely. Oh, thank you so
yes.
much. That's fantastic to share. Thank you. Now we'll let our speakers have a little rest for a minute. Because I want to again say welcome to the new people who've come today. Because I know there will be new people and you may not know where the Maternity and Midwifery Hour comes from. Now, our old friends, and I know we've got a lot of them there here too, you can kind of go and grab a cup of tea if you'd like to. But I'd just like to say that we had the Maternity and Midwifery Hour is now coming up. It's for 6 years old. And we started in the COVID-19 first UK lockdown in March 6 years ago, as a means of connecting midwives, student midwives, people who are in the maternity services, because obviously with everything going on in the health service, everything was very much focused on the clinical side. Services had to change. We had to have masks everywhere. You couldn't go out to do conferences or festivals or study days. And really, people still needed that connection, information, a bit of knowledge, and continuing professional development. So we started just having an hour a week where we looked at health, looking after yourself at a time of stress, which was really useful, I think. And also we did a lot on with the changes that were going on because of COVID and all the exciting and very creative ways midwives and other people organising the service were taking to make sure that women and babies got looked after well and got a service that they could cope with, though it was difficult because they had all the things of not being able to necessarily have your partner with you all the time and that sort of thing, which was very hard. And then also educationists, and Geraldine will probably have sympathy here, because of course the service for students was changed and that all sorts of adjustments had to be made to make sure our students were getting experience but also as safe as possible at that time. And it was a scary time, and every now and then you kind of remember how scary it was, where you just didn't know what the causes were and what was going to happen. And it's good if we can remember some of the things we learned. And some of the things we learned was being able to meet like this, which has been a real positive from COVID. And some of the things we've kind of let go of a bit, and I think we could do with holding them on. Like if you get a cold or you get a flu, you going out with a mask makes big sense. And I know people think it's a bit daft now, but actually it was a really good idea at the time. But certainly for COVID and now for colds. Anyway, that's me. I'll get off my soapbox for a minute. I also need to say that everything we do on the Maternity and Midwifery Forum is recorded. So if there's any problem and you have to rush off in the middle of this hour, don't panic. You can catch up later. You'll get the recording anyway, the link to the recording, and you can catch up. And also, you might find it very interesting to look at the Matflix website, because that's where all the recordings are kept, and you can dip in and sort of update yourself. So anyone who's doing revalidation or doing a project for work or doing a project for university, check out the Matflix back catalogues. There's a huge amount there. Health warning, it's addictive. And once you get in there and start looking at some of the presentations, you can lose a couple of hours quite easily. So just check out with your maternity unit or your university to see if you're subscribed. If not, you can subscribe as an individual. It's not that expensive. And you can just come in for a few months if that's what you choose. So, and there's also box sets, I ought to say that, which Dr. Jenny Hall looks after, and they have little reflective activities, and that's really good. If you're facing revalidation, I'll say this knowing Jackie's here on behalf of the NMC, if you're facing revalidation, you just need a wee bit of a refresher on how to do all the reflective stuff. Very useful with the box sets. And I'm also going to say, and I've just said about colds and flu and stuff, look after yourselves. It's a time when there's changes in the weather. It's suddenly got cold again. It's going to get a bit warmer next week, probably going to get colder after that. And that's the sort of time you do get things like colds and coughs, and you need to look after yourselves so you can look after others, but also to keep you well as well. So I'm on to the news. I'm almost perfect on time, not quite. And I would need to say Ramadan Mubarak. And I wish peace and happiness to all those observing this holy month of Ramadan, very special time. It's also Ash Wednesday today. People may not know about that. They'll know about the Pancake Day because we like pancakes, don't we? And that marks the beginning of Lent for us if you're Christian. And also, it's been a very busy week. I have to say, Gong Hai Fat Choi, and that's Happy Chinese New Year, and it's the year of the horse. I don't know what the year of the horse means this time. I haven't had time to look up what it means. Often there's lots of significance, but people seem to be talking a lot about prosperity and wellness. So I think it might have something to do with the horse. Now, also, I need to raise with you, there's a report from the NMC Spotlight, which has got lots of information about numbers of nurses and midwives, and that's those coming in and registering for the first time or re-registering, re-validating. It's information that we used to get quite easily online, and it seems to be nicely focused in a Spotlight report, which is really interesting. And it's all about workforce, and they were reviewing also people's feelings about the workforce. And some was good, and 50% of practitioners, and that's nurses and midwives, said they were generally satisfied with their day-to-day work. I thought it was more worrying that a smaller number wouldn't recommend their choice of career to other people, which made me very sad because I have to say, being a nurse, then a midwife, I wouldn't change a moment personally, but it is a difficult time for some people, especially when some students are facing the possibility of not getting a job after they qualify, and that's awful, and we should be really fighting on that. I think there's a big day in Hyde Park, I think, but I'll get details around and we'll put that round a bit later. And that's to sort of really raise the awareness for students facing and not getting a job. The other thing in that report I should add, which again makes me feel really sad, bullying, harassment, abuse and discrimination, still issues, and still focusing on things like age and ethnicity, still a big issue, and it's something we keep on having told to us, and we need to address it really strongly, really important. Now, I've put it on the resource list. Just beware, don't press print if you haven't got much paper in your printer, because it's around 60 pages, but it's worth looking at, especially if you're doing any work on numbers. And I know I can remember doing this as a student one time, having to look at numbers. So I can remember, depending on what you're looking at, it can be very useful. And there are other things that I know Jackie and Geraldine are going to talk about, which are lit on that resource list. So enjoy that afterwards. Okay, now this evening we're looking at the reality and the challenges of professional responsibilities surrounding informed consent. We talk about informed consent a lot. We know it's really important. We can't just assume consent at any time when we're looking after women and their babies and their families. We really need to address this. And especially when you keep hearing, and I've heard this term a lot in several pieces of research and reports, women saying they didn't listen. And we really need to address. We really do. And so we've got, and I'm really so delighted. We've got two fabulous midwives joining us to talk about. And it's going to be like, now Jackie called it a fireside chat. We don't have a fireside here. We're nice and warm and snug in here. But it's a kind of a discussion. But please do, as Geraldine and Jackie are talking, if you have questions, just pop them through in the chat line with Paul, and he'll fire them through to me. And I'm looking over here now because they'll come through over there, and we can have questions and answers afterwards. So I'm going to start with Jackie. I'm going to introduce both Jackie and Geraldine together because they're going to be doing their chat together. And everybody knows Jackie Williams, very experienced midwifery educator and midwife. She's kept strong links with midwifery practice and regularly works clinically in a local trust. She's passionate about the unique role of the midwife, quite right too, and women-centred care, quite right too. She's also a senior fellow with the Higher Education Academy, has particular area of expertise in quality assurance, and her role at the NMC is to advise on midwifery matters across the organisation, ensuring that midwifery is considered in all of the NMC's work. And that is a pretty full-time job, I would say. And then Geraldine is head of midwifery within the School of Nursing and Midwifery at the University of Worcester. She's also a professional midwifery advocate. She's extensive experience in teaching and learning in midwifery education, and she's passionate about public partner involvement in midwifery education. She's worked extensively with maternity service users and community groups to inform midwifery education, and as lead midwife for education, that's always the most senior midwife in the university, the LME. She works strategically with colleagues across the UK to enhance equality, diversity and inclusivity across midwifery education. And remember, the full CVs, I've given edited highlights, the full CVs are online. But in the meantime, I'll welcome Jackie and Geraldine. The screen is now yours, and thank you so much for coming this evening to share your chat with us. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much, Sue. And you might want to sort of be wondering, those of you in the audience, as to why Geraldine and I came together, but we sort of stumbled on each other in terms of having these conversations about informed consent. And I think it came from a place that I was particularly concerned when I was hearing about students and how they were achieving their births, and what was a tendency with good intent of students rushing into rooms to catch babies. Don't like that phrase, but that was the phrase our students were using. And what that actually meant for the student in terms of the quality of the experience, because they didn't necessarily know the women and they didn't know their history or anything much about them. But more importantly, what did it mean for the women? Were they in a sort of a situation where they were sort of pushed into saying, oh, yes, I don't mind having the student coming in, even though they may not have met them? So I think that's how it started, wasn't it, Geraldine? So we've done this session before, but it was a recorded session, but we're delighted to do it again, really face-to-face as our fireside chat. So Geraldine, before we want to get going, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about how we got together.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, Jackie. I think we both felt very passionate. I think coming from a background in education, particularly, I wanted to really empower students in relation to, a person-centred approach to their care. And I think in regards to intrapartum, it's really, really pivotal that our students are giving women and birthing people the best experience throughout all facets of maternity care. But as you say, that's how we came together. I think from your perspective with the Nursing and Midwifery Council, and from my perspective in education, to really empower students in regards to making that experience as best as we can for people. And that's really brought us here, hasn't it, Jackie?
Yeah.
That from the perspective of the regulator, and actually we had some changes to the Nursing and Midwifery Council standards that around care and labour. So that was really quite pivotal. What did that mean? And how could we make that really paramount for students that we're educating to be midwives?
Yeah, and Geraldine, I think we've talked about how maybe that standard, which was combined some 2 or 3 years ago, where we expect students to care for the woman and then conduct the birth, we feel that maybe that has not landed, because what we wanted was to get that holistic experience for not just the students, but importantly, that continuity for women. So, Geraldine, how would you then define informed consent?
Yes, Jackie. So I did do quite a lot of reflecting on informed consent. But I think if we think about a student or a midwife who is practicing, there is an exchange of information that needs to take place. In order for somebody who's using maternity services to give their consent. And what's really important through that exchange of information is that the information that is given is evidence-based, and that's reflected in the NMC standards. And there has to be illustration that the person that's receiving the information has been adequately informed and understands that information. So that's really, really important. And we are looking after a range of people where English might not be their first language, or there might be reasonable adjustments that are required. There could be learning differences as well. We have to think about how do we effectively and sensitively give that information to the range of people that we look after in maternity services. And I think what's really important through that exchange of information is that somebody feels that they've been prepared to give consent, and it should be free from coercion. So there should be a balance within that information giving, and the maternity service should be able to give alternative options as well. So that's really important. And whoever's using the service should be able to decline if they feel, the choice does not feel right for them based on the information that's actually been given.
And of course, the NMC code supports midwives to practice effectively, and they need to work in a way that involves women and birthing people to make those choices and decisions about their care. And of course, we know that maternity services users have a right to be involved in the decisions about their plans of care. And in some instances, they may actually decline that care.
That's right.
What does it actually involve then, trying to gain this informed consent, would you say, Geraldine?
Well, I think what's really paramount is listening to the woman birthing person. So the NMC is very supportive and is wanting midwives, and we're wanting student midwives to take a person-centred approach. So that is very much having a relationship, with the person, listening to them, hearing what they're saying, in order to help them with that decision-making process. So I think a midwife would be discussing, the benefits, any risks to something like a procedure as an example, considering reasonable alternatives as well. And just things like explaining what they're intending to do and why. And I think what's really important is maternity situations can happen very quickly, but sometimes the timing of when we give that information is really important. Particularly during situations where somebody is in labour. So really trying to prepare somebody, sometimes early, about their care planning, involving them very, very early. And I think what's crucial here, Jackie, is the relationship that you have with the person you're caring for, because they need to build trust. They need to build trust with the midwife who's caring for them. And I think, as you mentioned, Jackie, you referred to the NMC code. So, that's absolutely important here. So all midwives are working within that code, but also we are trying to familiarise as educators students to understand and work within the NMC code. There's also legal requirements and ethical connotations to the care that we're giving as well. So that's sort of the background in all of this as well. So, a couple of other things that I've considered as well, Jackie, is that real explanation. And it may be that we might stop what we're doing. So really sort of trying to read a person, how do they feel, even though they may have given consent. You know, we might have to read body language sometimes and, you know, stop what we're doing, go through things again. You know, is somebody still, you know, giving us that consent sometimes, you know, during a procedure if it's uncomfortable as well. So I think what's really crucial is that a midwife continuously does observe the person that they're looking after to pick up those sort of external cues. And hopefully with the relationship building, and, you know, if we use the example of intrapartum care, the care enabler, that's why this is so important, you know, because it does enable you to build up that relationship, create an environment for listening, for questions, so the person that you're caring for feels really, really safe as well. Being sensitive about what matters to a birthing person, I think that's really crucial. And because being really cognizant of cultural needs or any specific needs that that particular person may have. And it, you know, we may be needing to consider translation services as well. Capacity, so the Mental Health Capacity Act could be really important. Again, when we're looking at those legal frameworks, and of course, Jackie, our record keeping is really vital, and that's evidenced in the NMC code as well.
Yes, and I mean, it's so important, isn't it, this, Geraldine, that unfortunately this could have implications for the midwife if informed consent wasn't seen to be actually gained. So what do you think those midwifery considerations could be?
So I think what's really important is avoiding implicit paternalism when you're caring for somebody. You know, so that could be in relation to us assuming that there could be risks that, you know, potentially don't exist, or we're almost superseding the consent that somebody gives us, and we might be considering factors that are, you know, probably unique to the midwife, but are not really considering the mother and the birthing person. So I think avoiding implicit paternalism is really important. So we mentioned about ethical issues. We have to practice in a really ethical way, so we're not causing undue harm. So that is a, you know, real consideration here. And potentially we could be compromising safety, so safe care through some of the actions that we take if we don't have informed consent. Dignity and an individual's human rights are really, really important here. How is somebody going to feel, you know, at the end of their care experience? So quality of care, it is absolutely vital here. And again, I think, you know, a mnemonic like BRAN, which stands for benefits, risks, alternatives, and do nothing, that's what we need to be sort of considering in our approaches to gaining informed consent as well.
And I think, Geraldine, as well, that paternalism about this assumption that we know what's right for that woman, and of course she would want to accept that advice, but that is not necessarily the case, is it? And I think in our principles of supporting women's choice, we very much found that women were very well informed and they were making these choices from an evidence base. And how does the midwife sort of manage that? But we should be almost equal partners in this conversation, shouldn't we? Not saying, well, just because we are qualified that we know better, because the woman knows her own needs, she wants to make her own decisions, and she knows what's right for her. Yes.
Yes, that's right, Jackie. And I think, you know, through some of our national maternity reports that we're reading, and that Sue's alluded to at the start of this evening, does talk about people really needing to feel listened to. So I think that's a really important theme for all of us, you know, for students, for midwives as well. and that comes through the partnership that you just described between the midwife caring for that person. So Jackie, I just wondered if I could discuss a case with you, and it would be
Geraldine, do you want me to say a little bit more about the code at this point?
Yes.
And I'm bearing in mind that obviously the code was produced some time ago, and we're doing a review on it. But I'm sure informed consent will come in, as a very, very strong theme. But our current code absolutely encourages midwives to work in partnership with the women, with the people they are caring for. And just some sort of headlines really from the code, that you can look up later, but it definitely encourages them to empower people to share in decisions about their treatment and care. We must respect, we must support, and we must document a person's right to accept or refuse care. And I think, Geraldine, the art of record keeping is so critical here. And maybe that's something that another part of my life, I'm an expert witness, and I do still see some very challenging ways in which people do their records. And I think it's exacerbated now with the electronic record. Whilst the electronic record has its advantages, it's losing the narrative and some of the things that you may have written if you were sort of, writing it in the previous way. But this listening to people and responding to their preferences and concerns, and I think in the pressured service, this is really hard. And this is coming up, isn't it? We've already mentioned time and time again, women don't feel listened to. And to listen, you've got to have time, haven't you? You've got to have that relationship and not be thinking of all these other things. And I think that's what is very challenging for midwives in the current climate. But we are very clear in the code that you must make sure you get properly informed consent, document it before carrying out any care. I think that is I've always had a little bit of a challenge with that, because I think in reality, to always document before you give it is quite different. And I think I welcome conversations about that, but you definitely need to get that informed consent. And balancing that need to act in the best interest of people at all times and the requirement to respect a person's right to accept or refuse. We must have anything that we give that's evidence-based, and that paternalism comes in again, isn't it? You've got to have that balance so that you get that broad evidence base, not just something, pick and choose what you perhaps would like to give. And of course, we've already mentioned lack of capacity, which is of course a totally different scenario, which to be fair, we're not actually going to cover that today, are we, Geraldine? So
no.
But I think, yes, some case examples would be good now to really try and bring what we've been saying to light. So did you want to start with case scenario 1, Geraldine?
Yes, thank you, Jackie. So this is a case. So I'll just give a bit of narrative about the case, and it would be really, really interesting, Jackie, to get your perspective. As a regulator, the Nursing and Midwifery Council. So this is about Chloe Deacon. So she's a woman who's pregnant. She's a Gravida 1 paranaut, and she's been on central delivery suite for 7 hours. And she had a vaginal examination that indicated she was fully dilated. At the handover, the midwife in charge asked Sarah, a third-year student, if she needs deliveries. Sarah has conducted 36 births to date. The midwife in charge indicates to Sarah that she should introduce herself to Chloe at the start of the shift with the intention of entering the room to conduct the birth. However, Sarah will be assigned to care for another woman who is also labouring, and Chloe already has a first-year midwifery student supporting her. So Sarah's actually feeling uncomfortable about this situation. As educators at the university have indicated that students should be providing care and conducting the birth and not entering rooms without informed consent. So it'd be really interesting, Jackie, to get your perspective from the code and the Nursing and Midwifery Council in relation to the case.
Yeah, well, I've already mentioned about how we combined those two standards because actually they were separate previously, and we felt we wanted to combine them for exactly, examples like this. Now, I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because it is the change of shift. And if the student needs to leave, or there's some other reason why there needs to be a change of people caring for Chloe, then maybe there could be an explanation. But it's not ideal, is it? And I think if she is already, because I suppose if that's at the change of the shift and she's a prima gravida and she's fully dilated, is she going to deliver fairly promptly? Or is it going to be, a couple of more hours and then plus what's happening? So I think it's being the change of shift, it presents a slightly different issue, doesn't it? But I think we need to think of it from Chloe's perspective. She's had people caring for her for many hours. And the student, albeit that she's the first year, also needs birth. And I think we've got into this really interesting scenario that third years are getting more priority because they're obviously wanting the births to qualify. And yet then suddenly we get into this scenario that always third years, and of course you get then this perpetuating problem because within the England midwifery ongoing record achievement, it talks about how students should gain about ideally 5 births in the first year, up to around about 20 for the second. So they enter the third year really ready to start more consolidation as they move towards their final numbers. But so I think if we take out the sort of change of shift situation, I think Sarah's right to feel uncomfortable. I think it's going to be a slightly difficult position for her to challenge that. And I have heard of students who've said, no, first year's in there, they've got a relationship, I'll wait. And it is difficult. But I think we need to start shifting this culture, don't we, of these third years are automatically getting priority and recognising that all students should be a priority. And they've been giving that care and providing that continuity. Because Eve, is that the right time to get that informed consent that there's a change of student midwife when she's just about to give birth? She might have particular views, and you could argue that women give consent in that situation because, they don't want to offend, they're preoccupied, but actually would they give that consent if they actually had that discussed with them prior to that sort of situation arising? Now, if we took it that, say, Chloe had just turned up and she's actually going to give birth quite quickly, I think that's a totally different set of skills, Geraldine. I think, women do, give birth quite spontaneously. Some don't even make it into the unit. And that is a different set of skills. So that may be a totally different scenario in terms of not being able to care for them in labour because their labour has been precipitate, or they've come to the unit, or they've actually called the midwife perhaps later than they would have done. But I think what we really should be aiming for is that students are caring for the women in labour and then they conduct that birth so they can build that continuity and that relationship within it.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. I think you raised a really important thing for me as well about the person in this, and the NMC have done quite a lot on person-centred care. I didn't know if you could say any more about the person-centred care part.
Well, yes, because how do you know what that woman actually wants? Because to be person-centred, you actually would understand what their views are, how they've come to make decisions about their birth plan, things that are important to them. Just rushing in the room to that terrible phrase, catching babies. How do you really know what that woman's birth plan? is, you know, who's caring for her, what's their relationship, but more importantly, what is her history? You know, all the things that you know during that build up to that birth is going to potentially affect the care that you will offer. So rushing into a room, yes, you might get a birth, but is that quality experience for the student? I think it needs to be challenged, really.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. That's been really helpful.
So I've got another one. I've got Martha Andrews, and she's a woman. She's in active labour. Oh, she's also a prima gravida, and she's been cared for by Bethany, the midwife, and Lorna, a second year student midwife. And Bethany informs Martha that she seems to be progressing well. And Bethany asks Martha if she can undertake a vaginal examination to see how dilated she is. And Martha consents. And while Bethany is examining Martha, she finds that she's 9 centimetres dilated. That's great. Whilst Bethany is examining Martha, she finds, she asks her if she can rupture her membranes at the same time. And she indicates to Martha that this is likely to make the labour go quicker. And Lorna notices, that's the student midwife, that Martha is looking uncomfortable and worried about the procedure. So Martha asks if the procedure is going to hurt, and the midwife indicates that there should be minimal discomfort. But shortly after the artificial rupture of membranes, Martha indicates that she's finding the contractions much more painful. So that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you've almost got a 2-stage process of gaining informed consent, haven't you? You've got the initial doing the rupture of doing the vaginal examination, but then during the examination, you're actually asking for another consent to do something else. So what do you think about that then, Geraldine?
Well, I think with this particular case, Jackie, I just, again, when we look at the person-centred approach to care, for me, I reflect and I wonder how the mother might have been feeling about being asked to have another procedure whilst one was already happening. So I think when we look back at how we've defined how we've defined informed consent, and some of the things that shouldn't be equated to informed consent, like coercion, I just wonder how somebody might have felt that they felt compelled to have an artificial rupture of membranes. And when we look back at that definition earlier, it does talk about exchanging information that is evidence based. So the case is saying that the midwife is indicating that this could actually expedite the labour, and the mum's really quite uncomfortable after having an artificial rupture of membrane. So I think, how has that evidence-based been explained, so that Martha could actually make that informed consent? And I just wondered about your perspectives, Jackie, in relation, taking it back to sort of the NMC code, because I think potentially there could be some important learning from the NMC code that relates to this case as well.
Yes, I mean, it feels like, all of those scenarios about what would have happened within the vaginal examination should have actually occurred prior to the examination, and not necessarily even when they're in labour, so that the woman really understands that that might be something that they would additionally gain consent for, but they would have had the conversation about the pros and cons and, how they feel about it, but still checking that they're happy to sort of still proceed based on that earlier conversation. I mean, my observation, Jerry, is that I think we're in a real situation now where we've got to, as midwives, and really enhance our communication and our communication styles. I mean, women are saying they're not being listened to, but maybe we need to change the way we communicate. And it's not easy, is it, in those pressured environments? but it's thinking about how do you talk to the women at the right time to plan their care in an unhurried way, giving time for the women to reflect, consider their options, come back again with any further questions, need for further information. And I mean, we're seeing this a lot with induction of labour. And if I can share with you, Geraldine, a very personal experience from my daughter-in-law, at 39 plus 5, the community midwife said to her, well, next week we'll have the discussion about induction. Now, my daughter-in-law worried all week about that conversation because she didn't want that conversation, even at term plus 5, when that next appointment was. Fortunately, she didn't have to have that conversation because she actually gave birth 12 hours before the appointment. But I watched how, and I said to her, you don't have to have that conversation. And I could see it from the midwife's point of view. She was almost preparing her, but actually it worried her. And I think we've got to really tease out some of this communication, because that was a great shame for the final week of her pregnancy, just be worried about this conversation that was coming. So, Sue, I think it'd be really useful to bring in our audience now, widen our discussion, take any comments, questions and challenges even.
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute. It seemed to take a bit of a time. Sounds like a typical Zoom thing. That's really interesting. I wanted to know the end of the story, as I always do, but I know they're case studies. So
yeah, they are made up studies.
Yes.
To be fair, to just to illustrate the points. Not my daughter-in-law. That was not a made up story. No. But I think I'm certainly hearing more students coming to the NMC to say this is what's happening. And I suppose it's important to say, Sue, that I think labour ward coordinators, midwives, their practice supervisors are doing it with good intentions. They're doing it to get the students' births because they know that is something, that they need to get. But I think we need to maybe take stock to think what the impact of that might be.
Yeah. And I think it's worth sort of stopping to think about the issues, because it's interesting, isn't it, when you were talking about the possible changeover with the student midwives, and it kind of made me think, well, I wonder in any other field of life, if you're in the middle of something, like you're having an operation or you're at the dentist having care, you wouldn't expect someone else to kind of sweep in and come and take over. And the whole psychological thing of the woman thinking this is how it's going to be, and this person's going to help me birth my baby. We don't know how, for that woman, right. It may be that the woman would have seen that the second midwife, she might have thought that third year student looked nicer. She might have thought, well, she's got nice eyes and I'd like her to help me birth my baby. And you kind of doing a check in there, mind you, then might put the woman in an uncomfortable position, of course.
I think we've got to remember, Sue, as well, that students are supernumerary. So if it looked like that this woman was progressing during the shift, there would be no reason at all to actually to step out for an extended time, take a break, a proper break, and then come back. And if they were able, I'm not saying that, they've got their own commitment, students, but if they were able to stay on for a period beyond the shift, there's no reason to do it. Now, I know Geraldine will have views on that. She doesn't want students doing lots and lots of hours all the time. But there's a little, just thinking about how that could be sort of managed so that the student gets the outcome, and obviously important for the woman. But I think it has to be done on an individual basis. But we do work by constraints of shift patterns and whatever. And of course, women don't follow shift patterns.
Well, because you're kind of talking about individualized care for students.
Exactly.
And for midwives also. I mean, and individuals do care.
Yeah.
Because of course, if you've invested yourself in that, caring for the woman, you've got that, and you can see yourself but helping birth the baby as well. So it's a big thing. I mean, I was thinking also, because I like the because you made clear about, because I jotted down a question that I had was, how long does the informed consent last? And that became really live when you were talking about the woman having a vaginal examination and then the midwife wanting to do an artificial rupture of membranes, because that, I mean, how do you give consent when someone's hand inside you? They're saying, oh, we could, and it's quite often in the olden days, and that isn't so long ago, someone would say, oh, I'm just going to do that. Is that okay? And how can you refuse? Because it's done and dusted, isn't it? But it's
and we are getting, I mean, I'm hearing a lot more cases of women saying, particularly during a vaginal examination, that the consent wasn't given. You know, doing the sweep when that was not talked about.
Yeah.
So I think vaginal examinations are a particular area of concern, I think, at the moment when women are more involved. What do you think, Geraldine, about this?
Yeah, I think as Sue, as you've said, how can you give consent if one procedure, which is the vaginal examination, is taking place, and then you're doing an artificial rupture of membranes, which, you know, if you look at the evidence, will have advantages and disadvantages. So I think, how is that documented? How is that communicated? How might somebody feel, you know, after their labour? You know, I think that's a really important question, isn't it? Because people really remember their experience of birth throughout their life.
Absolutely.
So what we do is really pivotal. You know, people remember the details. And, you know, I just think in this potential case, does it have the risk of somebody feeling at that particular time, I didn't really want this, but I felt I had to sort of go with this because of how not just the situation, but the environment, just everything made them feel. And I think you raised a really valid point, Sue, about, you know, even the dentist, because that's an analogy that I use as an educator. That imagine, you know, imagine that you're in a dentist, you have lots of people coming in, and you don't know why they're coming into a room, and you feel quite vulnerable because you've already got somebody looking in your mouth, and you're thinking, why is everybody else? And so I think it's so crucial, isn't it? Sometimes there can be other people coming into the room, and that person doesn't know who they are, and just going back to this case with other people coming in, you know, because they want to do the delivery, and you don't know who they are. So I think there's something there, isn't there? And Jackie's been talking about this previously as well, about that real communication.
And I think that quality of experience for the student, because I think something that I've begun to think about more is that if you think about the whole 40 births, not all the births are equal in a sense. So the first few, you're just wondering, you know, where to put your hands and, you know, all the things you've got to do. And then gradually you start beginning to put it all together. Yeah. And of course, those final births, just before they qualify, really, you're looking at that holistic care and everything that you've got to be thinking about as the midwife, who's as the, you know, lead professional for that birth at that time. And I think, in a way, the more you've got to gain that quality. It's not just ticking these numbers off at the end. It's about that quality of the experience and giving students opportunity to gain confidence as well as competence, which is a bit of a plug for our practice learning review. This is something that may come within the standards, that we've got to assess students for confidence as well as their competence, because, you know, otherwise, what does that mean for when they actually enter registered practice and the support they need?
Absolutely. Now, we've got some questions coming through. We've got Dr. Erin Hanlon. Hi, Erin. Now, I'm looking over here. Remember, this is where the questions are coming through. And she says, Hi, Jackie and Geraldine. Wonderful talk. Thank you for your insights. Very informative. My question stems from something Jackie mentioned about the it's all jumped. Sorry, the recent move from the narrative birth records to digital notes. How would you advise midwives to document in the digital system in general, but also to capture consenting procedures? And secondly, in your opinion, that's saucy having two questions, is a workshop for clinicians warranted?
Oh, I think
might know the answer to that.
I think the last one, absolutely, because I think we've got to we need to sort of raise and discuss these issues, because, and this is all jumbled up for me with, you know, women asking for things outside of perhaps the guidance within a trust or a health board, women making maybe choices that you wouldn't recommend and whatever. And so that this whole area of communication really is absolutely crucial. I think it's very difficult, going back to the question about the records, because, you know, but you do have areas of narrative that you can use. And I think to try to really think about how you capture that without, you know, making it so huge that it becomes sort of meaningful. And it was interesting, I was listening to a registrar the other day, and how he'd really captured how he gave information about choices to women around induction and labour. So he'd actually done quite a bit of work to try and capture it, and talking about the recommendations in a sort of a fairly succinct way, but covering all the elements. But I think it's a bit of an art, Sue, and I don't think we've done it. We've moved to those, I mean, and I think there's always that thing about what you would do normally. But I think sometimes you do need to increase that narrative, particularly elements where things have been a little bit different, a bit more challenging. But yeah. And of course, the lawyers don't like the tick box, because they say, well, what does that mean? You know,
you can't win. You can't win.
But use those narrative boxes where you feel it is important.
Yeah. And I suppose you can always have your own reflections as well, of course, on that, so you can remember things if there was something tricky. Now I've got a comment from Jane Marshall. Hi, Jane. And Jane says, with practice partners at the local trust, the two AEIs have developed a birth priority system that considers all student midwives on duty undertaking intrapartum care on every shift, regardless of the stage of training. And if the woman is one of the student's caseload, this will take priority over any other student, including final year students. This respects the woman and continuity care. That's really useful, Jane. Thank you for that. And
I'm working with Jane actually tomorrow in Leicester. I'm going to find out more about this, because I think she needs to share it, particularly with the LMEs, so they can share it with their practice partners.
And this is the thing about being a midwife in a fairly good little world of midwives. We all know each other ish. And I've got Josie. Hi, Josie. And Josie says, as a student midwife, I'd love to see more births being achieved in year 1 and 2 and not crammed into year 3. As personally, I'm on 38 deliveries and technically finished my degree last September. Okay. It is hard to get the balance, because some students will get more in the first and second and do catching up. So
well, I know. I think it's just, I mean, I was working with a student on Sunday, and she came into her third year with 8 births. So her labour care is good, but how is she actually putting all this together, you know, when she's still very early on with those births? I think we need to get a balance, don't we? That, you know, I think if we could get to a point where students follow women, that would be marvellous. There are still plenty of births where, you know, physiological births where there's no student present. You know, women don't all, you know, give birth. I don't mean to be facetious, but they don't all give birth in the winter and spring terms, for example. There are births in the summer. There's births on Christmas Day. We need to get that spread of students, don't we? So that there's not too many students on any one shift or at any one time, so that they, you know, they can. But I think as well, and if students have time to make up, if they can do it more frequently throughout the 3 years, but it's trying to get them to enter their third year in probably a better position than perhaps what has been happening.
And sometimes you might have to do some catching of babies. And I think Jackie actually made the point earlier that sometimes this happens anyway. And you have to, the skills you learn in catching a baby, and when you haven't had that huge amount of time with the woman, it teaches you how to get a relationship very quickly with the woman and the kind of key points of what you have to do as a midwife in a fast way. But it's not ideal. But you learn what you can from that.
And not all the time.
No, not all the time. Definitely not all the time. Wouldn't dare. Another comment from Jane Marshall. To ensure all students' needs are addressed and they feel valued, we're closely monitoring how many PRERs they achieve each year. We have started to adopt the guidance on the MORA. Everyone knows about the MORA. This is the assessment process, clinical assessment record, to ensure students are closer to the guidance figures each year so they're not a great deficit by the final year. And then I've got Nirupama Prabhakar. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly, Niru. I hope that's okay. She says, hello, speakers. Thank you for this opportunity. It's very informative. I'd like to share my personal experience in maternity as a mother. I was full term with contractions. The midwife who came to check my dilatation did not inform me or seek consent, but induced me. I didn't know this was negligence until a few years later, after I got involved in into maternity myself. I did not have any language barriers, nor was I unsupportive in any way, but it did happen, and this midwife is a senior midwife, most still practicing. If student midwives are to be trained by them, that would be another generation of midwives who may fail in the same space of negligence. It would be a mistake of their own. And I mean, that's really helpful, Nero, to share that. And I'm sorry that happened to you, because it's obviously less than ideal. But I'm sure in your experience, you're actually addressing that. I don't know if you're a midwife or a student midwife, but I'm sure you are.
But Sue Nira has shared that with us.
Absolutely.
I think some years after. So these things really stay with women.
Absolutely. And on the positive side, I would hope that we're getting better at this. And this sort of discussion does help concrete it in our minds. I don't know if you want to say something, Geraldine. You haven't been speaking for a while.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I think yes, I think there's things from an education perspective that we could do as well. So, there was a comment about workshops, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to work collaboratively with our medical colleagues. That's a really positive thing to do. We can learn together and from each other, and do more collaboration around informed consent. And with the ideal that this is going to, benefit the people that we care for. So, I mean, that was a comment from earlier, and I think that would be a really good consideration from this going forward, because I think we're always trying to look at how can we do things better and how can the experience the people. So we've had an experience shared. So what can we do now that's going to make things better?
Absolutely. And I think that's for women and families, and for midwives and for students, because this benefits everybody. Be able to give proper informed consent rewards us all. Now, I did say, and I always say this hour goes faster than any hour in the week, and we've come to an end. So I think our audience will agree what fabulous speakers we've had, and thank you so much for the fast chat. And I think, especially, I think the case studies, I think that's beautiful, because that really did bring it to life. And I think people who are listening might think about this as a way, trying out a multidisciplinary workshop together and try out the informed consent, try out the stories, because that's we know the kind of theory, but it's the practice that we really need to get smooth onto. Now, I'm going to say huge thank you to Geraldine and Jackie, and also Angelo, who's in the background, making sure this is all beautifully recorded so that you will have this as a link. You'll have it on Friday morning as a podcast at 6 o'clock in the morning, if you'd like it. And it'll also be released next Thursday in the newsletter. If you don't subscribe yet to the Maternity and Midwifery Forum newsletter, it's a good time to get into subscribing. Doesn't cost anything, but it means you get a little snippet of information and all these lovely links nice and fast. So that's fantastic. Thank you also to Paul for putting through the questions and the comments to us. That was fabulous. And also, just to say, next week we've got Leah Hazard talking about safer delivery, working hours and conditions, the impact on midwives and well-being. So that's same place, same time next week. And I also found this is what we were talking about. I did forget to say what a fantastic festival. If you were there, it was lovely to see you. And if you weren't there, be there next time. Anyway, there was a lovely student midwife from King's College called Sophia, and she was raising this as a kind of action, a time of action. And this is No Jobs, No Justice for Student Midwives. And this is a meeting or a kind of conglomeration of student midwives. Fantastic. A wonderful idea. 3rd of March this year, 4 p.m. in Parliament Square Gardens, to have a meeting and really raise the issues of no jobs for students, because this is really important for us as midwives and for you as students. So there is information online. So have a look on Facebook or Twitter or Blue Sky and get that information. And in the meantime, thank you all so much for joining us. Think about your informed consent, think about yourselves, and take care. We'll see you this time next week. No, an hour earlier. Same place, same time. Take care.
Welcome to MatFlix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at MatFlix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At MatFlix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to MatFlix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
You're thinking, but I've never read about these midwives in the Bible, and that's because they didn't make it into the Gospels. Why was it that we nurses, midwives, seem so invisible to the doctors, to the media?
An amazing midwife said to me, you can't be what you haven't seen. These are the world's most researched probiotic, and we can say that with confidence because we've done over 300 clinical trials on this little bottle of goodness.
These awards, as you know, are